Okay, so last time we did 5A, this was kind of the picture we got from it. So let me think about what you need to know. Ooh, excuse me, from 5A. So you got to know the population. We have a big population of people. You have to know from that population, we're going to take a sample. So you should know what the sample is. So being able to identify population and sample from a group. And then there's something we want to know about the population. There's something we want to know about the sample. We're going to measure it from the sample. That's going to be our sample statistic. We're going to make some kind of inference to say something about the population. That's going to be the population parameter that we're talking about. So that is in 5A. We talked about the basics of statistics, how we take a sample, get the statistic here, try to make some sort of inference about the population in the population parameter. The other thing in 5A was experiments and observational studies. So knowing whether it's an experiment, knowing whether it's an observational study. So in an experiment, you are proactive in that thing. You are giving them a treatment, you're giving them a placebo or a control. And you're trying to figure out if this factor influences another factor. So it might be medicine. Maybe you're trying to see if I don't know, some kind of medicine reduces the incidence of heart attack, right? You're going to give them the active medicine. You're going to give them the placebo. You're going to see whether one of those groups does better or worse with like heart attacks. The other thing, what would we do? That was experiments. So if we do experiments, and it's kind of hinting at it, the other thing in experiments was single blind and double blind. Single blind if the person taking the medicine doesn't know. It's double blind if the person giving them the medicine and the person taking the medicine don't know. The other thing was observational studies. So observational studies, we don't really get a lot of options with how they're made up. It's just looking at reality around us, basically. But sometimes reality can be kind, and it can line itself up just like an experiment with a control and a treatment group. I forget what the book uses. They use something else for treatment in one of them. I can't remember the word. But basically, it is like an experiment. You have a control and you have a treatment. And that is called a retrospective study. So that was the other thing that was in 5A. So knowing those terms, knowing how to identify population sample statistic, population parameter, all those things are things that you should know after 5A, hopefully. Are there any questions on that first section? I did, didn't I? Yeah, I'm recording. Okay. Are y'all ready to start 5B? I feel like this one went really quick, or fairly quick. Okay. So in this section, they give you 8 guidelines for evaluating a statistical study. And so let's go through them right quick. Get a big picture view of the study. So what do they say? You should understand the goal of the study, the population that was under study, and whether the study was observation or an experiment. Okay, so this also, I think they also talk about knowing basically all the details of the study, but also I think that in this one, I think is also where they talk about comparing it to other things that you know, right? Does it make sense with sort of like everything else that we know, or is it contradicting everything that we know? If it's contradicting everything we know, we definitely should hold like a bigger magnifying glass to it, right? Definitely put it to more scrutiny. There we go. And I said it last time, but like a lot of these questions in here, you're gonna have to write me some English. You're gonna have to write me some sentences to to describe what's happening. There's not like one sort of x equals 32. This is the solution, the only solution sort of answer to these things. With that said, let's continue on to number 2 is what? Consider the source. So this is for biases in the source. Who is conducting the research? This always reminds me of Sweetums, like in that, was it Parks and Rec? I think they have studies that they always do on there. If Sweetums is telling you sugar is good for you, is it good for you? Probably should be a little skeptical of that. They have profit motive, right? So number 3 was look for bias in the sample. So we talked a little bit about this last time, but how we choose a sample, biases can come up with it in that. Look for problems in defining and measuring the variables of interest. So these are things like how happy do you feel or something like that, right? It's like the things that they're talking about here are not well defined. So problems in defining, think about things that aren't real well defined, like moods or emotions or something. If we're trying to measure something like that, those things are really hard to define, right? How do you define happiness, sort of thing? Your happiness might be different from someone else's happiness. So ambiguity in variables can make it difficult to interpret reported results. How many happy are you? 3 or 4, right? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So it's a little bit hard to measure something like happiness. Oh, there's one country, I can't remember what it is. That, like, it doesn't measure itself in GDP like every other country. They measure themselves in happiness, some kind of scale. I don't know. Beware of confounding variables. All confounded variable. What does that mean? It basically means there's a third thing you didn't think about. So real life example, I know for a while there was like some sort of study going around that was like, it showed a correlation between people living by like telephone poles, and I want to say it was cancer. And so the people living next to telephone poles were getting higher rates of cancer or something along those lines, or some sort of illness. And it turns out that the telephone poles have absolutely nothing to do with it. People that live next to telephone poles were likely to have made less money, and people that live further away were more likely to make more money. It had a lot more to do with sort of income and poverty and those sorts of things than it really did anything with the telephone pole. But that would be like a confounding variable. They didn't consider their income, right? They just looked at telephone poles and they looked at their illness. And so there's a third thing out there called income that was more deterministic, right? And it actually determined whether they were getting sick or not. If the study, okay. Ooh, excuse me. Consider the setting and wording in surveys. So this is the suggest. When you write questions, you want to write things that are neutral. You don't want to write things that are suggestive, right? And so that's where this thing is coming in. Considering the setting and wording, look for anything that might tend to produce inaccurate or dishonest responses. From my understanding, where you put questions in a survey, whether they're at the top or bottom, also makes a difference in how people respond, I think, the order. But like I said, you're probably not ever going to get completely like 100% rid of your biases in your study. You're just going to do your best to kind of minimize them, I think. Check that results are presented fairly. Check whether the study supports the conclusions that are presented in the media. So we had, like last time, there was that Fox News poll, and they said something like women regift more than men, but when we plugged in that 3% margin of error, their study was not cashing in on the claim they were trying to make, right? Wasn't buying it. So you got to make sure what they're saying actually supports what's being said with the study. Like I said, numbers don't lie, but people do misinterpret them, right? So the solution to that is to be better able to interpret things so that you can catch this when other people do. And I'm sure I said it in the notes. I'm sure I said it probably in class, but like statistics, it is a really good bullshit detector. You don't always get the confirmation, I don't think, but like you can reject claims. If someone's saying that this bag is equal to 16 ounces of food product or something, right? You can check whether or not companies are actually putting them out in the bag they say they are, right? Whether it's food, whether it's any product. You can check that sort of thing with statistics. Okay. Stand back and consider the conclusions. Okay, so this is evaluate whether the study achieved its goals. If so, did the conclusions make sense and have practical significance? So what are they proving in the study? Is that the same thing that they are concluding in whatever you're reading, right? Are they using that study to actually conclude the same thing? What sort of practical significance does it have? Are there any questions about those 8? So in the rest of this, I think if you want, and it's probably really beneficial, like have those 8 things somewhere, because basically this entire section, you're going to be quoting one of those 8 things, and then you're going to tell me how this example applies to it. So should you believe the study based solely on the information given? Do you have reason to question the results or the methods used in the following hypothetical studies? Explain your reasoning. A study by the Liberal Center, I can't even read. A study by the Liberal Center for American Progress is designed to assess a new Republican budget plan. And so a lot of these, I feel like they're really hinting at one of those 8 things. There are probably other things you could tell me, but these, I feel like, especially this one, is really hinting at like one of them. Which one is it? Y'all can type or y'all can talk, whatever you want to do.
Would it be considered the source?
What number is that? Like 2?
2, yeah.
Yeah. And why do they say that? 2 words here, right? Mainly they're hinting at that's a liberal center, that's a Republican plan. Those are on opposite ends of the political spectrum. So definitely look at this study with maybe a little bit more larger grain of salt, right? Or smaller grain of salt, I guess is what I meant. Larger scrutiny, smaller salt, something along those lines. Are there questions about like how this would be considered the source? I mean, there's probably other things you could give me too, right? Like how are they doing this study? Where are they drawing their sample from? These would all be things that I feel like you could probably say, and I'd probably give you credit for. But what I'm really looking for on this one is that considered the source. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So consider the source, but definitely explain a little bit. So give me a little bit of an explanation. This is a liberal center. This is a Republican budget plan. They are from opposite ends of the spectrum. Oh, man. Okay. Should you believe the study? A TV talk show host asked the TV audience to text 1 if they support and 2 if they oppose a law requiring background checks for all purchases of firearms. So I feel like there's one that really kind of jumps out. There is another one here that I feel like is also a pretty good answer.
Is it look for bias in the sample?
Oh, yeah, that's absolutely what it is. Um, so we have a TV talk show host, or if it's a TV talk show, and you're appealing to what? A TV audience. So this would be bias within the source, how you're getting your source. You're not going to get everyone out there, right? You're only going to get people that are watching this TV show. It's a TV talk show, so if it's a political talk show, then you're also like you have that political bias in there. If that's what sort of talk show it is. It all depends what sort of talk show. They don't really say. Um, so you're limiting it one with the TV bias. The other thing is they have to call or text, I guess is what it says, right? So they have to have text. They have to have a phone of some sort. That's probably like less of a limiting factor now than it has been in the past. It seems like everyone has a phone. Okay. The other thing I would say, I don't know if this falls. Maybe it's number 6. Consider the setting and wording of the survey. I would say that maybe you could say that. I would say that because they're limiting the choice. One, if you support. Two, if you oppose. There is another third option, and if you go vote and stuff, that's what this reminds me of because I just got a text. They usually give you a third option of like, did you not vote for it? Are you undecided? They usually give you a third option. There's usually positive, negative, and neutral, right? So maybe if you wanted to say they were limiting the choice of their survey, something along those lines, I would probably give you credit for that too. Well, like I said, there's probably not exactly one correct answer. There's probably a few good ones. There's probably a few that aren't quite as good. There's probably a few that are probably not anywhere that I want to see. But are there any questions about this one? So I think it's definitely the limited by sample, right? What was that? Number 3 was look for bias in the sample, I think. Ooh. So I believe on the quiz and in the homework, I give you the note, and then you can have your notes in the homework. In the quiz, I believe I give you those 8 rules, but I believe I just give you like the bolded or underlined part, just that first little phrase. Like you should pretty much know what it means if you hear that first little phrase that's there. You know what I'm saying? Like get a big picture view of the study. Consider the source. Look for bias in the sample. So I'm hoping like just from that first sentence, whatever they have there that's bold or underlined, that you know what the thing means. So I'm not expecting you to memorize every single one of these things. I don't have these like memorized. I mean, I do them when I look at sources. I think about these things, but I don't have them like memorized 1 through 8. This is what they are. So if you're thinking you have to memorize these or something crazy, I'm not expecting memorization. What's happening here? Oh, we did this already. Oh, it's losing connection. Come on. Next question. Come on. Should you believe the study? I think there's one study in here somewhere that we should believe. But everything else, I think the book pretty much scrutinizes. Researchers designed 5 survey questions to determine whether Europeans are more optimistic than Americans. So what are they hinting at here? What's the one? I feel like there's really just one on this one, but maybe I'm wrong. You might be able to convince me there's more.
Is it the fourth one?
So which one? Look for problems in defining or measuring the variables of interest. Yeah, why would you say that? What's the key word there? What's hard to define?
If they are more optimistic?
Yeah, how do you measure optimism, right? Are you 3 optimistic? Are you 4 optimistics? I'm a whole 1 million optimistics is how much I am. Don't know. Those are that's a concept that's vague. You know what's optimistic for one person could not be optimistic for another. It's like, I'm cheery today. It's like, you are? Okay. Could have fooled me, but differing definitions of what optimism is, right? And it's not something that's well defined. We can't put a metric or a certain measurement to it really well. We could maybe ask them on a scale 1 to 10, how optimistic do you feel? But even that, right? If some person says one person's 7 could be another person's 8, right? It's not something well defined. Should you believe this claim? Based solely on the information given about the following hypothetical studies, should you believe this claim? An educational research group that tracks tuition rates finds that tuition at a particular small college is 50% more than it was 10 years ago. So can you find anything wrong with this one? What about an educational research group? Would they be a reliable group to depend upon? Probably.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that's probably pretty good. They're an educational research group. They're probably educated people that are like doing it through grants. It's probably pretty reliable research. They're probably peer reviewed. They're probably publishing their stuff in scholastic journals, and they're probably peer reviewed. They're going to track tuition rates. They go at a small college, and they figure out it is 50% more than it was 10 years ago. Does that seem about right? Probably. Like your tuition's going to go up by half of what it is right now over the 10-year period. Yeah, that seems like a pretty reasonable claim, knowing that the cost of college is going up. So I think, how long should I give y'all on this one? Is the question. The book says they say this is a good claim basically. There doesn't seem to be too much wrong with it. You could probably be super scrutinous and maybe ask like what sort of questions they asked or something, or you might ask what small college they went to if you wanted to verify it yourself. But yeah, if you're looking at something from an educational research group, it's probably pretty reliable, I think is what they're getting at. The source is good. The information that they're given seems reasonable in a big picture sort of view of what we know about college tuition. So I think pretty sure the book says that's a good claim. Yes. Go. Grocery shoppers on a Saturday morning are invited to taste test orange juice and vote for their favorite brand. Oh, bias. So they say identify at least one potential source of bias in the following studies or claims. Explain why the bias would or would not affect your view of the study or claim. So there are one, two, probably three. There's probably like at least 3 or 4 things you could probably give me if you explained it a little bit. Just give me a little explanation with it. What's one bias?
The taste of the orange juice.
They're what?
The taste of the orange juice.
What do you mean by that? How's that going to bias people?
Like some people may like it and
Would it be selection bias?
Yeah. I was thinking about the bias in the sample that the way that you're selecting it. But if you're talking about, you're only going to get people that want to taste test orange juice, right? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, something like that.
Because I would say that maybe like you're going to get people that want to do this. You're going to only probably get people that like orange juice to sample this. So there is this thing about like when you go out and do this, you're only going to get people that volunteer for this, right? So there is that voluntary selection bias. You're only going to get those weirdos that volunteer. Here, it's probably not so bad. Like most people probably like orange juice, and it's not like a big thing. But if you're going like to the mall on a Saturday morning and trying to get people to fill out a 100-page questionnaire or something like that, right? You're only going to get really, really weird people that have nothing better to do, basically, right? It's going to be some weirdos answering your questionnaire. So you have that like participation bias. They have to freely want to participate in your survey. What's another bias?
Oh, the source? Maybe like no.
It's within how they're conducting this. There's 2 things I see that I still want to hit.
Is it the favorite brand?
I would say this depends. So vote for your favorite brand. If they're showing them the brand, right, that can influence their choice. So they should be doing this as a blind study. If they're not doing it with a blind study where they're covering the brand name, then we get bias there within the people participating. I was talking about how they're selecting people. How are they selecting people that's going to create a bias? Are y'all? I know it's 8 in the morning, but are you going to wake up 8 in the morning on Saturday? I'm not going to be in a grocery store at 8 in the morning on a Saturday. I can tell you that. So I think one of the big things here is this Saturday morning. And you're in a grocery store. So I think those are the things that they're hinting at are giving me a selection bias. You're not going to get those people that are hungover, right? They're not coming out to shop early Saturday morning. You're also getting people that are at the grocery store. I remember Paris Hilton trying to pretend like she didn't know what Walmart was or something. Not everyone goes to the grocery store, right? Especially now with everything happening now with curbside and everything. You're going to get people that willfully go into the grocery store. So there's some more bias there. Other questions? So I feel like all these, we talked about 4 or 5 different things. I think it's just asking for one bias or something, right? At least one or something. Identify at least one. So, like I said, like a lot of this, it's not going to be like a one sort of shoe fits all sort of solution. You're gonna have to write some sentences and explain what you mean a little bit by the bias. Are there any questions on this one?
No.
Okay. Next slide. Okay. Hmm. Oh, this one's too obvious, I feel like. So still identifying bias. Explain why or why not the bias would affect your view or study of the claim. We didn't do that on the previous one, did we? So does this affect your view of the study or claim? So we see that they might have a bias in what? I think Saturday morning grocery shoppers. Does that affect your view of the claim? Do you think that, like, if they did this test on a Saturday morning, would those people's orange juice preference be different than maybe people that shopped later in the day?
Yes.
It might be, yeah. I would say it might be, but I would say in general, like they're probably pretty safe. Like they probably have the same preference for orange juice. But these are also early risers, so they might be like more of the orange juice enthusiast sort of people, maybe. They like breakfast or something. So I don't, that might be more something. That sounds like more of a personal question, if I'm being honest. Does it affect your view of the study or claim? I would say that they're probably pretty safe, and that like the people that shop later in the day probably have like the same preference, but we don't know that. And to make that assumption, it could be your downfall, right? You don't know. You're better off doing it at different times of the day to make sure that it doesn't have an effect. So that's what I would say there. Like I would probably believe it, but I probably wouldn't put too much faith into it, I guess is what I'm saying, right? I probably wouldn't like assume necessarily. I would say there's probably a pretty good chance that people that shop early in the day have the same preference as people that shop later in the day. Just knowing how like preferences usually play out. But it could be different, right? Because like, I don't know, working food service, you get different crowds, different times of the day. That's what I'm kind of thinking now. It might be different. There's a good chance it might be different. It's one of those things, better safe than sorry, I would do if I were conducting the survey. I would definitely put it different times of the day, but An article in the Journal of Nutrition, noted that chocolate is rich in flavonoids. The article reports that regular consumption of foods rich in flavonoids may reduce the risk of coronary heart disease. The study received funding from Mars Inc., the candy company, and the Chocolate Manufacturers Association. What could possibly be wrong with this one?
There's bias in the source.
Yeah, it's the people, right? This is coming from the people that make the chocolate, and they're telling you chocolate's good for you. What possibly reason could they have for lying? Right? Definitely got a profit motive there. It's probably true that chocolate is rich in flavonoids. Regular consumption of foods rich in flavonoids may reduce the risk of coronary heart disease. And there's a lot of things within this, right? We don't really know what they're talking about. What is regular consumption? How much is regular consumption? And it says foods rich in flavonoids. Well, chocolate is rich in flavonoids, but it's not necessarily the most healthy thing. Usually it's packed with sugar and other things. So they're I feel like there's some vague wording. They're kind of linking two concepts together, right? That may not necessarily go together through vague wording. But the main thing is that we're talking about people that produce chocolate and they're telling you that chocolate's good for you. You should probably be pretty skeptical of that. That's how they make their living. Oh man, what's the Upton? There's the Upton Sinclair quote, and I can't think of it now. Where he talks about how you can't like pay a man to undermine the way he makes his living, something like that. You can't convince a man to, I don't remember what it was. I just lost it. They've done studies, 60% of the time it works every time. Okay. My pop reference for the day, I guess. This is why we're being critical of studies. So hopefully you don't say anything like that. It's on the wording. Princeton Survey Research Associates did a study for Newsweek magazine illustrating the effects of wording in a survey. 2 questions were asked. Do you personally believe that abortion is wrong? And whatever your own personal view of abortion, do you favor or oppose a woman in this country having the choice to have an abortion with the advice of her doctor? To the first question, 57% of the respondents replied yes and 36 replied no. In response to the second, we get 69 of the respondents favored allowing women to have a choice and 24 opposed. Discuss why the 2 questions produce seemingly contradictory results. How could the results of the question be used selectively by various groups? So how are these questions different?
The first question's more of their own personal belief, like about abortion.
Yeah, this is more just like they're asking more about personal belief about abortion. And in here, they phrase this more as a what? I believe woman's choice sort of issue, right? So for one, I don't think it's not even like exactly the same question, right? It's a little bit of a different question. But there's other words in here too that are really, they're kind of leading you. Do you personally believe that abortion is what?
Wrong.
Yeah, right. So we see this word wrong. What is that suggesting? It suggests to the person that's answering this that abortion is wrong, right? And if we read the second one, do you, I think that word right there, right? Favor. We want to favor people's rights. We typically, like most people, tend to want to be agreeable with the people around them. Like I think it goes into the survival instinct, right? We want to work together with the things around us in our environment. But like if you ask someone if they're pro rights, they're probably going to answer yes, right? And if you ask someone, do you believe this is wrong? They're probably going to answer yes. So they're priming them with these words like wrong and do you favor? And also with like choice and rights, I think is also another one, right? Do you favor? And there's one thing that they do here that I know it's probably not part of it, but it also like kind of primes them. Advice of her doctor, right? And so they're pulling on an authority figure there, which is something that like people are really, really receptive to. Because if it's the advice of a doctor, who are you to oppose the advice of a doctor, right? So that's another thing that's really kind of leading in this question. Both of these are really horrible. Like I hope like if you actually want to know people's opinions on abortion, you should not ask either one of these, right? But if you were agenda driven and you just didn't care about reality so much, do you personally believe that abortion is wrong? This would be used by what? Someone that opposes abortion? Someone that's an anti-abortion advocate, right? Would probably use this first question. Whereas someone that was pro-women's rights would probably use the second question. But even like the way we like typically describe issues, especially this issue, right? We don't like typically say you're pro-abortion or you're anti-women's rights. We typically say you're anti-abortion or pro-women's rights. So that's probably a wording there. You know, it's probably a bit to consider there. You usually don't phrase things that you favor in a way that is unfavorable. Are there any questions about this one? Okay. So this one is all about the wording of the question that they're trying to get at here. And if you went and read the notes or listened to the notes, whatever, I think I put that video with the brain games in there where they have the car wreck and they ask them about the car wreck. Same sort of thing. You can really, really lead people. You can lead people into misremembering things, right? So leading questions are definitely problematic, right? You want to do this neutral, and maybe that's something to do. Do you personally believe, or what? Instead of saying wrong, right? You could probably just ask them, "What is your personal belief on abortion?" Yeah, I don't know. This one might be a little bit harder to fix. But we could fix these a little bit, right? To where they are more neutral. Any questions on this one? We're going pretty quick here. All right. And so they're going to produce different results, I guess. I don't know. My goal is more to have an honest response. I'd rather know what people think, even if I don't agree with them. You know, it's better to have that knowledge than just to like try to coerce everyone to believe the same thing you do. I don't know. Accurate headlines. Oh, we're going too quick. We got 2 more problems though, at least. Consider the following headlines. I think this is a good exercise. So consider the following headlines, each followed by a brief summary of a study. Discuss whether the headline accurately represents the study. So when we look at papers, they are writing the paper to sell the paper, right? And so sometimes headlines, they're there to grab your attention. So sometimes they can be misleading. Sometimes it's sometimes they don't have very much journalistic credibility. I want to say journalistic credibility. I don't know. Or integrity, I think is probably more the word, right? Sometimes they make people the butt of things that they really shouldn't in order to sell a headline. But there we go. The headline says something like drugs shown in 98% of the movies. And the story summary says a government study claims that drug use, drinking, and smoking was depicted in 98% of the top movie rentals by the Associated Press. Usually when you see Associated Press on something, you can pretty much believe it's true. Whew. So does that headline follow from what is being said in the study?
No. The headline says the headline more like says that like it's shown in like 90% of all movies.
Yeah, so this
I
is
also
basically saying all. And this
yeah,
is
what's
saying
the story? Says
top movie rentals, right? Yeah, yes. So that says 98% of all movies. This is saying 98% of the top rentals. Having flashbacks to Blockbuster for a second. Okay. Have y'all watched that documentary, The Last Blockbuster or whatever? It was pretty interesting. I think it's on Netflix. It was a different era. I'm being a little bit nostalgic, maybe. But yeah, so 98% of the top movie rentals. We don't know about the other movies out there. If we take in the independent movies, it's probably more like 99.9% or something. Who knows? No, it's probably less. Drug use, drinking, and smoking, 98% of top movie rentals. Does that include cartoons? I feel like there would be more kids movies or something, without that. Some of those old cartoons had drinking and smoking and stuff in them, so I don't know. I think that was in like Miss Doubtfire. He's a cartoon voiceover guy, right? And he's like starts off, and they're expecting him to do this voiceover on a cartoon that's smoking. Have y'all seen Miss Doubtfire? Or am I aging myself too much? Had Robin Williams in it. Pierce Brosnan, who played James Bond. And GoldenEye. Oh, this one's neat. What is the question? Discuss the differences between the following questions, each of which could be the basis for a statistical study. So what percentage of internet dates lead to marriage is the first one. And what percentage of I know this almost sounds the same, right? What percentage of internet dates leads to marriage? And what percentage of marriages begin with internet dates? I'm gonna do this. Let me color code it. Let's do this one orange. Let's do this one green. Okay. So if I want to know what percentage of internet dates lead to marriage, what's my population in that first one? Like if I go out there and I want to sample people for this first question, where am I going? Am I going to people that dated on the internet, or am I going to people that are married?
People that are married.
What are we doing it out of?
People that dated on the internet.
Yeah, of like this is indicating, let me get not that green. Let me get a burnt orange. Of internet dates. This is telling me the population I should draw from here. So of internet dates, how many led to marriage? So I'm going to go to, for this first one, what percentage of internet dates lead to marriage? I'm going to go to all internet dates, right? And I'm going to ask them the question, or the statistic is going to be like, are you married, right? I'm going to find the percent of people married. What about the other one? Hold up a mirror to it. I think it's the other way around, right? Where's my text? And do green. And so if we look at this second one, it says what percentage of marriages begin with internet dates? So for this one, for my population, I'm going to want to go to what? All married couples. And the question that I'm going to ask them, the statistic that I'm going to grab is, Did you begin on internet, right? Internet. And so one thing, maybe you can see it here in the wording, but when they say of marriages, right, that's giving you sort of the denominator. So I have this many internet dates out of total marriages. Maybe that's one way you can think about it. Internet. What percentage of this out of marriages, right, is what I'm thinking here. I'm thinking about this percentage here, internet dates out of the marriages. The other one is you're thinking about what marriages out of internet dates. Yeah, come on. Are there questions about this? Are we getting like this? I know this is a weird one. It takes me a second to read it and reread it and think about what they're asking. Because it is like sounds very similar. But when they give that word of, this is going to be your total. This is going to be your base, right? And so this should be the thing that you're drawing from. So what percentage of internet dates, we should be drawing from the people that have dated on the internet. And then we ask them, hey, are you married? And then this would be like drawing from the marriages and asking, hey, did you begin on the internet? Internet and internet, interwebs, whatever you can call it. Are there questions about that? Are we getting this crazy wording?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Does this stuff seem doable? I guess that's my question for you. Anything else I need to go over today? That's the final question I got for you. Okay, so I know I'm ending probably a little bit early, but we do have work that you should be doing, right? So I'm hoping you have at least like started researching, right? Are there any questions over what's expected for the research paper? 3 pages. You gotta have 3 pages of your own writing. You gotta have 1 page that's got a page sources cited page. 3 sources. Find something that's interesting to you, that's math related. I'm trying to force you to do recreational math is what I'm trying to do a little bit. I feel like there's a certain rigor that happens within math. We take a certain path, right? I want you to get off the beaten path a little bit. Do something that's a little bit off the normal path of what we're doing here. Try to get you to enjoy math a little bit if that's possible. But like my sort of analogy is like if I have to read a novel, like I'm gonna enjoy reading that novel probably significantly less if it's like something that is demanded or required from a class versus like if it's something I go out there and find on my own, right? And so that's what I'm hoping you're doing is like going and finding something semi-interesting to you, something that maybe applies to you, something out there that involves math or a weird mathematician, whatever you want to do. Talk about how they did math. I don't know. If there's no questions, that's all I got for you today. Like if you haven't started on that essay, like now is the time to do it. So I know I'm leaving like a little bit of time, but like I'm hoping you use your time. we got one more section. So I should probably say this while I'm recording it. We got one more section after today. We have one more week. So I know for the most part, like I have been accepting late work. As long as it's gotten turned in before the test, I've pretty much graded everything. If you're turning stuff in like way after the test that we've taken on it, then I probably haven't gone back and graded it. But the last week is next week, right? And so there is no late work to the last week. You have to get stuff turned in that last week. I'm not sticking around the week after to grade stuff. That's not happening. Grades are getting in before then. So we need to have stuff in by the test. Any questions? I just don't want people to pile stuff up and then be like, I'm going to submit this late. It's like, no, that's not happening after the last week. So I don't want people to go through that if that's what's going to happen. If that's it, then that's all I got for you today. Like go study that stuff. We got one more section. I believe we're going to make a few charts, a few pictures, I think is what that last section's over. I'm going to hit stop on record then.